Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Power You Have. I'm your host, Pramila Jayapal, and this is a podcast about you and the power you have to keep our democracy. It can be so incredibly overwhelming to face everything that's happening in our country today. And there's a lot of people who may feel like you just can't make a difference. Well, you can. And we need you. You have power, and this podcast is all about helping you to use the power you have. We've had amazing guests on each episode who tell us how they've used their power and give you ideas for what you can do too. So I want to thank everyone who has tuned in to hear us talk about so many topics: immigration, our constitutional protections, reproductive rights, travel and foreign affairs, and the labor movement. And today we've got another amazing guest, my good friend, Kristin Rowe-Finkbeiner, the co-founder and executive director of MomsRising, a grassroots organization of 1 million moms that educates and mobilizes support around the issues that impact women, mothers, and families the most. And while MomsRising is a national organization, I just love that Kristin is based in my home state of Washington. We're going to be talking about Trump and Republicans' big bad betrayal bill and other policies that have been absolutely devastating for countless American families, Kristin's vision for our resistance, and how we can most effectively fight back. But before we get into that conversation, let's just take a look at some of the ways that this administration has betrayed working families in every corner of America just in their first 7 or so months in power. Now, remember, this president is the guy who during the campaign said that his priority was to lower costs on day one. Well, what has he done instead? He has enriched himself and his family. Just look at the crypto coin that the Trump family just released. It netted them $5 billion in profit in just the first day. Meanwhile, what's happening to costs for working families? They're just going up. Let's start with childcare. This is something that every single parent knows to be absolutely vital to their ability to work, to make a living wage, to pay the bills, and to provide for their family. And I hear about this issue every single day in my district. But instead of helping families afford childcare, Trump immediately took aim at Head Start, one of the most important programs in our country. Launched over 60 years ago, Head Start has provided childcare to more than 38 million kids and their families, as well as health and nutritional support to so many more. But instead of expanding a very successful program, Trump attempted to freeze the federal funds for it. Families across the country panicked. Parents weren't sure if their kids would have somewhere to go the next morning. Teachers didn't know if they still had jobs. My office got calls and letters from terrified constituents. There was no communication, no plan, no reasoning, and eventually the funding freeze was blocked in court, but it showed exactly what the administration's intentions are, and it's definitely not to lower costs and help families afford childcare. Now, here's the thing. Childcare is one of those investments that benefits everyone, right? It allows kids to get good care. It allows parents to go to work. It allows everyone to benefit from that. And that's why I and 98% of Democrats in Congress pushed so hard under the Biden administration to pass universal child care, where no family pays more than 7% of their income in child care costs. Just imagine that. And get this, we would have passed it, except that 2 Democrats in name only, that's Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, and every single Republican refused to support it. We got incredibly close, and we're not giving up, I can promise you that. Now, adding to the rising costs of childcare is the outrageous cost of housing and the fact that the rent is too damn high in every single place in the country. In my home city of Seattle, you need to make $91,000 a year just to afford rent. Between 2019 and 2023, rents jumped more than 30%, which far outpaced wage growth and just makes it so much harder for millions of families to afford a home. In my mind, housing is a human right. No one should be homeless. And when you're on the streets, everything else is so much harder or impossible. And so once again, investing in housing helps every single part of the economy and all of our families. But instead of making housing more affordable, Donald Trump is crushing the housing programs that we have. His crazy and indiscriminate tariffs have made it more expensive to build homes, slowed the production of new affordable apartment complexes, and made our country's already dire housing shortage even worse. He also decimated the Department of Housing and Urban Development, announcing that he was going to slash the agency's workforce by 50%. That means fewer employees to enforce civil rights laws and to compile crucial data about the housing market. It means delays in processing mortgage and insurance claims and getting funds out to communities to rebuild after disasters. Then in July, Trump announced a proposed change to put a 2-year limit on the federal government's main rental assistance programs. If he gets his way, a family that is well below the poverty line would get kicked off of Section 8 vouchers after just 2 years, even if their income or their economic situation had not improved at all. A New York University study estimated that 1.4 million households could lose their vouchers and public housing subsidies. And most of those are working families with kids, many of whom would end up being evicted. This is just inhumane, it's cruel, and it makes absolutely no sense. Homelessness is not a personal failure, it is a policy failure. The United States is alone amongst countries of our wealth to have this kind of a housing problem. And it's exactly why, along with my colleague, Congresswoman Grace Meng, I reintroduced the Housing is a Human Right Act. This is my transformative legislation to authorize more than $300 billion for affordable housing, infrastructure, and support services to reduce homelessness, because not a single person should be living on the streets in the richest country in the world. Okay, last but definitely not least, let's just talk for a minute about healthcare costs and the massive spike that American families are going to face because of Donald Trump's big bad betrayal bill. In the richest nation in the history of the world, we have more than 85 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. And despite spending twice as much per person on healthcare as other wealthy nations, 1 out of every 4 Americans cannot afford their prescription drugs. Over 500,000 people go bankrupt due to medically related debt every year, and more than 60,000 people die annually because they can't afford to go to a doctor. And yet, Donald Trump and Republicans have decided to make our healthcare system even worse. The centerpiece of their big bad betrayal bill was a nearly $1 trillion cut to Medicaid over the next 10 years, which will lead to millions of lower income Americans losing the health insurance that they so desperately need to survive. Almost 40% of kids in the United States are on Medicaid. Countless families rely on the program to live every single day. Without it, they simply wouldn't be able to afford to see a doctor and literally could die. This isn't a red state or blue state issue. It impacts everyone. Medicaid provides nursing home coverage for 5 out of 8 seniors. It pays for 41% of births in the United States. I've just heard so many stories from friends, from constituents, from strangers about how Medicaid has saved their life or the life of a loved one. Medicaid makes miracles possible. It saves lives. It keeps hospitals open and our healthcare system afloat. But Trump and Republicans decided to slash the program, all so billionaires could get a giant tax cut. And because of their actions, millions of kids, low-income seniors, people with disabilities are going to lose crucial coverage and face unpayable medical bills. It was a shocking betrayal of the American people and everything that this country should stand for. And as disheartening as this may be, we cannot afford to give up this fight because so much depends on it. And that's why I'm going to continue pushing for solutions like Medicare for all, because healthcare is a human right that everyone should have access to. But more on that in another episode of this podcast. So, what do we do about all of this? How do we use our power to fight back? Well, you're doing that right now. The Big Bad Betrayal Bill is incredibly unpopular. And across the country this last month, you, constituents, showed up at town hall after town hall in Republican districts to make your voices heard and to hold those Republican Congress members accountable for voting for a bill that decimates working families. Trump's approval rating is at its lowest point ever, and people are starting to understand that he is breaking promise after promise to working and poor people while profiteering off your pain. Billionaires get another yacht, and the American people get poorer and sicker. That is not right, and we do have the power to fix it. So when you see Trump's approval rating hit a record low of 37% last week, know that it's because you are using your voice and your platform to fight back. When you push back on how masked men from ICE are kidnapping and disappearing people right here on the streets of America, know that you are having a massive effect. When you stand up to his authoritarian takeover of Washington, D.C., and 56% of Americans say that they disapprove, it means we are winning this argument and making a difference. When you show up to a rally or a march to say no kings in America, it matters. And when you get trained on the most effective ways to resist, when you refuse to cooperate with the things he's doing, and you speak out at your church or your community center, your newspaper, your workplace, that is literally the only real protection we have against a wannabe dictator. And that is the perfect segue to our guest today, who has been using her voice, her platform, her smarts, and her organizing superpowers to build our resistance movement. Kristin Rowe-Finkbeiner is the executive director and CEO of MomsRising, an award-winning author, public speaker, and tireless advocate for women, moms, and families. She has helped lead the charge against so many of the harmful Republican policies that we've just talked about, and she is a brilliant strategist and a dear friend. Okay, and here she is, Kristin Rowe-Finkbeiner. Thank you so much for being with us today on The Power You Have. I can't think of a better guest to have who has just used her platform in all these incredible ways. And we're going to dive into some big issues today. But before we do that, I have always been inspired, stunned, amazed by what you have built at MomsRising. And so tell our listeners a little bit about MomsRising and what brought you to start the organization initially.
Well, first I want to say thank you for your leadership every single day. And speaking of inspired, I'm inspired by your fight for democracy, your fight for all of us, and that you continue to persist and advance victories even against all odds. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I really, on behalf of over 1 million moms, want to say thank you, Representative Jayapal. You are truly an inspiration, so thank you. MomsRising is an organization of over 1.2 million active moms. That's 1 in every 300 people in America are now active with MomsRising. And yes, I'm surprised about that stat too. I'm like, wow, what's happening? This is great. We actually have a movement, a tsunami of change growing. And our list, though, is over 3 million. So when we say 1.2 million active people, we mean active. The actual list, the community is over 3 million. And the audience reach, because we have a broad social media, blogging, radio, podcast audience, is in the tens of millions. So MomsRising is working to increase family economic security, to stop discrimination, and to build a country to help build a country, to help champions like you build a country where every family can thrive. And that's the core of the mission right there.
And what got you to start it, Kristin? How'd you get into this?
Well, I got into this as a we. There's no me. There's about a bazillion co-founders of MomsRising when we really look closely. So I, like many moms, when I had my first child, was really surprised about the full lack of a care infrastructure in the United States of America. I was raised by a single mom, and I was always taught to never rely on somebody else to help put food on the table or roof over our heads, because that was not guaranteed, nor is it guaranteed really for anybody at any point in time. Mm-hmm. And so then I had always planned to stay in the labor force when I had kids. So I had a child, fast forward. He was born with a primary immune deficiency. It was an unplanned health emergency. I, like bazillions of people, yes, that's a number, bazillions, was knocked out of the labor force because I didn't have any paid family medical leave, and I had a health crisis of my infant. And there I was, sitting there with a sick infant, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of what the heck, and I did what every person does who worked in politics until that point. I called the U.S. Census. That's what you do when you are upset.
Nobody does that except you, Kristin.
And I said, how many people are there like me that have been kicked out of the labor force? I knew that I could not be the only one. And they said, we do not know. We only know what's happening in the shadow of a married spouse. At which point my hair lit on fire.
Wow.
I was ignited to really start taking action, to write about it. Because, of course, I was raised by a single mom. That didn't include same-sex couples. It doesn't include all kinds of partnerships. It included, like, not the majority of America in many ways. And so I started looking into it more, and I found out that families with a stay-at-home parent were 7 times more likely to live in poverty. And I was like, we have a problem. We have a problem. And so that was the beginning for me.
Wow, I have known you all these years, and I don't think I ever knew that it was because you called about the census to get that actually makes sense, knowing you as I do. But what an amazing story for people across the country to hear. You used the power you had. You had the power to call and ask that question, and then, of course, to, along with all of your other co-founders, to found this amazing organization. You mentioned childcare, and I want to talk about Trump and the Republicans' attacks on families, because I think this is something that we have been working so closely together on. They have literally wreaked havoc on all of our public assistance programs, slashing affordable housing vouchers, cutting Medicaid, threatening Head Start, and so I think I wanted to ask you to talk about where we stand now. What does this mean for moms across the country? The kinds of things we've seen happening. What does that mean for moms across the country?
It is a state of emergency for moms across the country. We are experiencing rising costs. We're experiencing chaotic economic policies, everything from what you just mentioned, cuts to Medicaid, cuts to SNAP, cuts to child care programs, and also tariffs, which are coming and going from Donald Trump in ridiculous ways that are turning our economy upside down with its unpredictability as well as with its bad economic policy. So we're in this moment where we have rising costs. And what's interesting is when you look at the rising costs, the costs for essential life necessities like rent and food and childcare are going up much faster than most other things like the cost of a TV. And so it's hard for people who are families to keep up with that rising cost situation. I mention this because solutions are possible, right? When we have an economic situation with the rising costs happening like they are right now, solutions are possible. I'm so thankful Absolutely. That you've been pushing for them. But Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress are doing the opposite of what nonpartisan economists are saying would help lift our economy, our families, and our businesses. We know from economic studies that adding resources to childcare, to health care, adding paid family medical leave so people don't get pushed out of the labor force, adding resources to all of the ways that we can get nutritious foods. All of that actually helps boost our economy, and it helps lower costs. But instead, Republicans in Congress and Donald Trump are cutting the very policies that would lower costs and boost our economy. And in doing so, they're hurting families. And they're doing it in the most hypocritical way of saying that they are, quote, for family values, end quote, when in fact they are devaluing families. Like the writing is on the wall. It's in the math. They are devaluing families. And Moms Rising, we recently are starting, we're launching, I'm going to announce it right here, a new thing. It's hashtag Trumpflation Tracker.
Oh,
so
nice.
When you see out in the wild that your groceries cost more, that your diapers cost more, that your utility bill costs more, that your housing costs more, erase your independent information about where you live. Don't post that online. But post the picture of the price tag online with hashtag Trumpflation so we can help hold some accountability to what's happening, because Republicans in Congress are saying they're doing one thing, but in actuality are legislating another thing. And what they're legislating is undermine families in an already precarious situation where families are already in an emergency. It is ridiculous, and yes, I'm mad.
And you should be, and we all should be. I think that Trumpflation, hashtag Trumpflation, is a great way to just track exactly what is happening. And the fact that we have a president who said he was going to lower costs on day one, and here we are in the situation that we're in. And, you and I also know that it's not like we're just building back to where we were, because we were already in a situation where we were the only country in the world of our richness, our stature, our wealth, that doesn't provide universal childcare, that doesn't provide paid leave, all the things that are so important for families to do well for themselves, but also, as you mentioned, to contribute to the economy. I mean, this, when a family does well, when a mom can get the childcare she needs, when people can go out into the community and do work, that benefits our economy. I want to ask you, Kristin, outside of kind of the biggest cuts that have gotten the most attention, I think about Medicaid in this category and the big bad betrayal bill. That's what I call it, by the way, the big bad betrayal bill. Can you give us an example of anything that the administration has done that hasn't gotten enough attention? Maybe a cut that's gone under the radar that you're finding from your members across the country is maybe just as impactful, but not getting the attention it deserves?
The cuts are still rolling out across the country, and what we're hearing the most from our members right now is school is coming back into session.
Yeah.
Is that the cuts to the Department of Education, the cuts to Medicaid are also having rolling cuts into states for programs that have nothing to do with healthcare. So we're seeing a lot of cuts into unhomed people being able to have programs to get homes. And so we're seeing a lot of cuts also that teachers are trying to absorb, again, back to school, with trying to buy the back to school supplies themselves, with trying to figure out how to help children who might need a little extra help in school that is now gone. So the cuts are really more extreme than many people know, because they were planned to roll out over time, not just on one day, so that people would possibly not notice. Well, here is what we tell Republican leadership and Donald Trump. We notice. We are moms. We notice when our kids are trying to not eat the green beans on their plate and they're putting their green beans in their napkin on their lap. That's noticeable.
I used to do that, Kristin. I used to do that, and my mom noticed.
Moms notice. We also notice when you cut education, when you cut healthcare, when you cut childcare, when you cut hospitals, when you cut all of the programs that, as you said, allow people to go to work, allow people to raise their kids, and most importantly, allow people to contribute to their communities. So the Republican policies, as you know, that both Republican leadership and Donald Trump are pushing forward are undercutting America's ability to contribute to our own communities and to raise our own kids. And it needs to stop. So what we say is don't give up. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We're not going to change this tomorrow, but we will change it together in many tomorrows. One of those many tomorrows is coming up in the midterm elections, which is happening sooner than many people think. So now is the time to make sure that not only are you registered to vote, but your two best friends are registered to vote, and their two best friends are registered to vote, and so on and so on. We need as many people registered to vote as possible. That needs to start yesterday. And we need to make sure that everybody knows that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And we need to save democracy and our families and our economy and each other in the long term. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but together we will make it happen soon.
I think your optimism and your, just sort of stick-to-itiveness is so important, because I think there are a lot of people who look at what's happening and they feel really frustrated and they feel like they can't do anything about it, when in fact they already are. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to help people use the power they have. But if you look at the unpopularity of the big bad betrayal bill, and the fact that in town halls across the country, Republicans who all voted for this thing, despite knowing that it was terrible for their families, for their constituents, they are getting, yelled at, held to account. And that is so important, because they have to feel it from the people who voted for them. I want you to take because you're so good at this, I want you to take a step forward into the world that we are creating together, that we will create. And the moment where we have a Democratic trifecta again, and the ability to really pass policies that are going to lift up moms, that are going to lift up families. What are the most important policy priorities on your plate that we can be talking about right now, and that we can be working towards getting the legislation ready, so that when we have the chance, whether it's with Democrats or whether it's with a few Republicans who suddenly come around, great, but that we start to move forward the kinds of things that actually help our families be strong?
I love this question. And I have a list that's about 1,000 pages long. And
you got to give me your top priorities. I'm gonna make
I'll give you top. Healthcare. Everybody gets sick, whether it's getting strep throat, hurting your elbow, or getting something worse. And every single person needs a chance to get better. As you mentioned earlier, pretty much every other industrialized nation on the planet Earth has universal health care. And the United States of America is going backwards, not forwards, in terms of our healthcare access. That needs to stop. Democrats, I know, will stop that trend toward rolling back healthcare and move toward healthcare for everyone when elected. And that is so incredibly important. So thank you in advance for your leadership on healthcare, because I know you have it. And thank you in the past.
I've got the Medicare for All bill, and we are out in the field right now. And I'll tell you what, it is so incredibly popular. It is crazy. It is not limited to Democrats, Republicans, independents. Everybody believes that we should not have a for-profit healthcare system that makes Americans have medical debt in numbers that no other country in the world of our wealth has. So I'm all with you.
I'm with you there too. Childcare is a huge emergency. Yeah. 7 out of 10 people in America across political parties are more likely to support a candidate who supports childcare, because we need childcare to be able to go to work, to raise our kids. And we need childcare workers to earn living wages so they can stay in their profession. So there are solutions to these top 2 policies that we have mentioned. It's not rocket science. They're like waiting in the sidelines, but Republicans have been blocking them.
Yeah.
And that is ridiculous, outrageous, and needs to stop. Republicans need to get out of the way of their own constituents who support these policies, and help America be actually better for everyone, so everyone can thrive and everyone can build a good life. I'm so excited that we have solutions to the problems that we face, because there's a lot of problems that don't have solutions.
Yeah.
But many of our top policies in America have solutions at the ready, which Democrats most definitely will pass and bring through. Other policies include access to SNAP, which is nutritious food. That used to be bipartisan. It is oddly a political football right now, and it shouldn't be, but we know that Democrats support access to nutritious food. Thank you. As well as education, K through 12 education, so important. There's the list. I'll stop there. I have a long list, but I will add paid family medical leave, access to earn sick days.
I knew I wasn't going to get you. Well, I'm going to ask you about one more that you haven't mentioned yet, but I know is incredibly important to Moms Rising and to your members. And that is immigration, because obviously we are, and I've been so impressed whenever I see a Moms Rising event, whenever I'm there, the diversity of your members and the fact that so many of your members see what is happening to their caregivers, to their neighbors, to their coworkers, to their friends, to their family, in this crackdown, this horrible, horrible anti-immigrant crackdown that Donald Trump has been leading, where, Kristin, I never thought, as an immigrant myself, one of only just a couple dozen naturalized citizens to serve in Congress, I never thought that I would see masked men on the streets of our cities snatching and disappearing and kidnapping people from the streets and just disappearing them and then detaining them and deporting them, and sometimes, against court orders. Most recently, 600 children who were going to be deported in the middle of the night to Guatemala. And luckily a judge stopped that temporarily. But I want to ask you about the effects of the anti-immigrant policies that we're seeing right now, and how your members are experiencing this moment, and also ask you to put on your positive hat about how this is another issue where we have the solutions. We know exactly what to do. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
I'm glad you brought that up. The immigration tragedy that's happening right now at the hands of Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress is unprecedented and is negatively impacting communities, families, school children, classes, everybody across the country. And that's what we hear from our members every day. Whether or not somebody has an immigrant in their family, we have school children going to school, worried that their best friend will not be there when they go to school the next day. Of course, people who are directly immigrants are more impacted.
But it affects everyone. I think that's a really important thing. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of teachers worried, a lot of kids worried, a lot of family members worried, a lot of colleagues worried. I mean, everybody is worried. It's fear. It's rightfully worried because, as you said, we have masked people taking people out of their cars, away from their homes, out of classrooms. We've had people taken out of the classrooms. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm almost speechless about it. And let's be clear what this is being funded by. In the big, horrible, awful, ridiculously bad bill, there was $150 billion put into, quote, immigration enforcement, which is really human rights abuses in the name of immigration enforcement, paid for by the cuts to Medicaid.
That's right.
So Donald Trump and the Republicans in Congress just cut our health care, cut the health care for 17 million people to pay for more atrocities, to pay for terrorizing hardworking immigrant families, to pay for separation of families, to pay for human rights abuses. That is not okay. And when we're talking about the care workforce, we have to remember that 40% of the care workforce are immigrant family members, immigrant people in the care workforce. So people who are having medical crises are getting a double hit often. Their very beloved care worker is possibly in danger, and they're losing their health care at the same time. It's really awful. I mean, I'm just like, when we talk about mad and angry and upset, it's awful. And for sure, what you said, solutions are possible. Our nation absolutely needs a safe, comprehensive, secure immigration policy that is compassionate, not cuts to health care and not cruelty like we have right now. And you, as a leader, Representative Jayapal, have put forward beautiful policy, like absolutely stunningly effective immigration policy that Republicans have blocked time and time again. So the end note of this is it doesn't have to be this way. We do not have to have militarized streets. We do not have to have masked people coming to our classrooms, terrorizing our students, separating our families, and really doing dangerous things in our communities. We could have proactive, positive immigration policy like you've proposed, and that's why I adore you. That's one of the many reasons why I adore you, because you come forward with solutions. And I think the thing for people to take away, the hope part, is here too, as you're reading these devastating headlines, and they are devastating, just know that solutions are not only possible, they are in motion, and we just need to shift who's in leadership in order to help get those policies through. And that means, honestly, electing Democrats because Republicans are out of control, and it's hurting our economy, our country, and our communities.
It's really a shame because, there have been Republicans in the past who have understood that this country would simply not work if we shut down all immigration, as Donald Trump is doing, and going after, people of all legal statuses, including, by the way, U.S. citizens who happen to look like me, are getting detained and put into detention for days and weeks. We are now spending more on detention in this country, which I would call incarceration, immigrant incarceration, than we spend on the entire Bureau of Prisons. And I think that, one thing that's really important that you're saying here is that we have the solutions for these things. It's not like we don't know how to fix childcare and make it universal. It's not like we don't know how to make sure that we have universal health care. It's that there are certain interests who benefit from the system as it is, and Republicans who benefit from continuing to be, lift up the immigrant as the person who's spoiling everything, when in fact it's the billionaires who got all those tax cuts in the big bad betrayal bill. I want to talk to you about Resistance 2.0 because, I think that your voice is really important here. What are the opportunities that you have seen for us to really break through all the noise and reach people? You have over 1 million active members. You've got over 3 million, 10 million that are, paying attention to you. What do you find breaks through in terms of speaking to everyday Americans who are worried about how to survive, not thrive, but just barely how to survive? What can we say that makes a difference and that gets them engaged?
One of the things that I'm continually surprised and inspired by is the power of everybody's stories. So, for example, let's take healthcare. Anybody who's listening or watching has a healthcare story. You've either gotten sick and been able to go to the doctor, or gotten sick and not been able to go to a doctor. So you have a reason that everybody should have access to healthcare. When you can condense that story into a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs, and share that with an elected official, share that with the media, share that with a friend, you're changing the narrative, which allows lawmakers like Representative Jayapal to then have an opening to push through policy that matches the narrative. Let me just share a little bit more about that. Many members of Congress have always had health care, especially those who oppose universal health care. Right. I'm laughing because you can either laugh or cry.
I know.
There's a tragedy right here. But we think of the stories as a Give a Clue project. And the people who need to hear those stories the most are the people who oppose the policy related to the story. So, for example, Senator Tillis, recently, he was one of the only votes against the big bad betrayal bill because of health care. Yeah. That didn't happen on accident. We had vigils sharing our healthcare stories outside of all of his in-district offices in North Carolina. We delivered healthcare stories to his offices. We got a chance to connect with him about his own healthcare stories, because again, everybody has them. And then that garnered his vote for healthcare and really breaking with his party. So healthcare stories are powerful because they're a give a clue to elected leaders. Mm-hmm. Healthcare stories, or stories in general, are also powerful with the media, because oftentimes the media isn't reflecting or respecting who we are as a nation, and so hearing the stories allows them to more accurately reflect and respect and show what's happening in America. And then most importantly, stories are helpful to build a movement. So many times in America, we say, it's your fault, Kristin, that you don't have access to healthcare. You must have done something wrong that you don't have access to healthcare. Well, that is totally not true. It is not my fault alone that I do or don't have access to healthcare. When this many people are facing the same types of struggles at the same time, We don't have an epidemic of personal failures. We have national structural issues that we have solutions for, and we can and must solve together. And that is why I'm so excited about you, Representative Jayapal, because you know the stories, you know the solutions, you know the policy, and you're fighting for us. And so I'd be curious, what do you think about stories?
I think they're so important. And actually, I was thinking about this as you were talking. We just had the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's horrific sexual assaults and child molestation here at the Capitol this week. And it was so powerful, Kristin, to hear these women really tell their stories and have people understand how outrageous it is that too many of our Republican colleagues, and I give a lot of props to Thomas Massey, Ro Khanna, who have been leading this and brought some of these survivors here to the Capitol, and to all of us on the Democratic side who have been pushing for real transparency and oversight. But I was just struck by the power of their stories and the way in which their courage and their ability to tell that story and connect all the dots for people and really have people care about this, not from some intellectual perspective out there, but really from that individual woman who was standing up, who had been abused as a child, who had been brought in to this ring of very powerful people that included Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and all the other people, including within this administration and this White House, who were part and parcel of it. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the stories are an important way for all the reasons that you mentioned. This podcast is called Use the Power, and you kind of answered it already, but I'm going to ask again if you have other ways to advise people who really want to make a difference, who want to get active. What else can they do? They can tell their stories. They can write an op-ed. They can contact their members of Congress. Do you have other advice for how people can get active, or even a story or two of a MomsRising member that, has just decided that she's going to make a difference and has come forward and been able to do that?
Oh, there have been so many. I would say that some of the best advice is to find an organization or a group of people who think similarly to you and get involved. And there are organizations like MomsRising whose job it is to watch the chaos that's happening in Congress and look for the openings that could be fulcrum points for change.
I love that.
And then send out, okay, now is the best time to call, to write your letter to the editor, to have a small group, to hold a sign on a street corner, to, share your story, to do all the things at the same time. One of the things that we've learned over time at MomsRising about winning is that it's not one person or one tactic that's ever going to win alone. It is multiple tactics and multiple voices. And that's important because that also means that when you are part of a movement, you don't need to do everything. You just do what you have time to do in that moment. So 1 week, you might have time to make a quick phone call for 2 minutes to your member of Congress and say, hello, please vote to save healthcare. Also, by the way, stop taking away K-12 education. And then my list goes on, as we all know. So you might only have time to do that 1 week. But the next week, you might have time to go with a small group to meet with a member of Congress or their staff and share your stories. And then the next week, you might only have time to click something to sign on to a petition and that will later get delivered in bulk directly to the leader that it's addressed to. So the big thing is that every tactic is important, and the biggest tactic through it all is persistence.
I love
because
that.
This is the moment that it's getting tough. This is the moment when we're looking at the headlines, we're going, this is the moment when a lot of people are doom scrolling. Don't do that. Don't doom scroll. Maybe look at the news one time a day. This is the moment to hold hope in our hearts, knowing that hope is optimism and hard work combined, and that's how we make change. So get involved, stay involved, use every and any tactic that comes in front of you that you have time to do, but don't put the pressure on yourself to do everything, because any little bit you do will be part of that wave of necessary change to save democracy.
Well, that is such great advice. If you've been listening, that really is how Kristin Rowe-Finkbeiner is all the time. She has that much energy all the time. And we are so grateful, Kristin, for all of your work. Thank you so much for joining us on The Power You Have.
Thank you so much for your leadership and for saving our democracy each and every day, time and time again, Representative Jayapal.
All right, everybody, that is our episode for today. Please don't forget to subscribe so that you can catch every episode of this podcast. Please spread the word about it and make sure that you continue to use the power you have. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.